Are you someone who has experience with a mix of sewing but is looking to get into the bridal sewing niche? This channel is for you. Hit subscribe to become a part of the community. Oh my goodness, guys. It's bridal season. Have you noticed? I am back. These long form videos that I've been sending to you guys, I know you love them, but they take a lot longer to produce. So as I mentioned in my last video, my videos are kind of going to be further apart when they're the long ones versus the short ones. And then also, of course, it's bridal season. And so I just don't have time. I can't find time for those long chunks of video production right now. But I haven't forgotten you. I'm still here. I'm still popping in the comments. You can still email me. I'm still here for, like, you know, emergency consultations, whatever. So reach out to me if you need me. But as you guys noticed, my BST besties, in the community tab, I posted something a couple weeks ago. Let's see, when is it? Actually, sorry, it was a month ago I put this up that my voice, I had lost my voice due to allergy season. And so I wanted to do another Q&A for you guys. And so this is the way I'm going to do it. I'm just going to go through the questions and answer them, the ones that you put in there. So this will be a long video, but it's going to have a lot of varied information in it. So I hope you find it super helpful. If you have more questions, of course, put them down in the comments below and I'll be happy to answer them. So this is going to be more podcast style for those of you that want to hit play and then just get to sewing and you can listen in. I know I like to just do a lot of audio intense stuff in the background while I sew. So you guys can do that, and then I'll let you know when I have a little sketch part to my answer. You can just kind of pop over and look at the screen real quick to see what I'm saying. All right, Susan Brunson says, often customers request a hem, especially prom gowns, without the extra fabric being removed so that it might be restored and resold. Could you do a video on pinning and hemming without cutting the extra length? Because of the bell shape of the skirts, there's always an abundance of extra fabric that I have to work in the hemline. What's the best way to deal with that? All right, so here's what I answered to her. Gotcha. I would offer to serge it 3/4 of an inch too long and then fold it under once, sewing along, that's a typo, along the edge of the fold. I would then tack the excess up wherever there's a seam line to tack it to. I would never allow them to keep more hem allowance than that on what's supposed to be a rolled hem. Now that's just tacky. Now a bagged hem won't look great, but you can keep more like I put like an inch and a half up inside of a bagged hem. Some of you call it bagged, some of you call it a lined horsehair braid hem. That's actually what I call it. I know it's more words, but it just seems more visual to me about what I'm talking about. Because a bagged hem could also be confused with a, oh Lord, my mind's going blank. You know, the poofy ones. It could be confused with the poofy ones that they kind of grab up underneath and poof. All right, so let's see. Pickups, of course, can be reversed. So if ever it's a ball gown, you can always mention to them they could get kind of the bell. Bell is in Beauty and the Beast. The bell style skirt, and you could just put pickups in it. That a lot of times they'll go for. Then I mentioned I can absolutely do a video on this because I just had a bride bring me a rental gown that she bought. It's a really cool story, guys. She bought this rental gown from out of the country. So apparently they have this whole different way of making bridal gowns for rentals. And it was fascinating to see the way that this gown was put together and how quickly you could alter it and how reversible the alterations were. So that was really interesting. And I, of course, got a lot of footage of that for you guys. Let's see. So let me sketch a little bit here. What I'm saying is, she's saying, you know how the hem gets wider as it goes down, right? So if they ask you, to retain like 3 or 4 inches of hem. Most of these gowns are made for 5'10", okay, in height for the wearer. If they ask you to retain 3 or 4 inches, it gets wider. And so at these seam lines, you know how it grows. Can you picture that? That's what she's talking about. That's the problem. If you really must keep it and roll it under, it's going to look kind of junky. Hopefully there's like an overlay or something that they don't mind pickups in. You can always make it, you can go like this. This is a side view, okay? Side view. You could always say, like, let's say this is the point that it needs to be hemmed. You can always sew it straight like this. Turn this wrong side out, okay? So this is the inside. The outside is tucked in there. Sew it like this. And then when you fold it up to the seam, you're going to have that extra triangle in there. And you can do that at each seam if there's a lot of seams. So there is a way for you to actually make the dress kind of shaped like this with your sewing. And then sew on the very edge. And then you're going to have, you're still going to have some extra up here. And you could just hold it up with some chain tacks. Okay. I really just think that's going to look bad. I would warn them about that. I don't really do that. It's their property. So whatever. But what I was saying I would do is I would probably just hem it maybe only 3/4 of an inch too long and just serge that edge and roll it up once and then put your stitch right along the very edge of your new hem edge. And then I would tack it at each seam so that it doesn't flip down. And that's how that rental dress was done. They just tacked it under. The problem with that is if the bride or the prom goer steps on it, she can rip that hem out, that hem allowance really easily. So that's the problem with that. Another thing is you can do a large rolled hem, like a 3/4 of an inch rolled hem. The problem with that is it's going to be bunchy. So there's your very thorough answer for that. All right. Now, Iveen says, any updates on your book? Will it have some of your fun illustration skills? They are always so funny. So, thank you for enjoying my illustration skills. I just can't help myself. That's what I like to do. But anyways, updates on my book. Okay, I want to back up a little bit and talk about, again, guys, do this mostly podcast style where you listen. It's going to be really boring to watch. This is mostly something to listen to in the background. All right, so updates on the book. I'm going to back up a little bit and say when I initially started this channel, I expected really slow growth because that's what people always talk about. Oh my goodness, YouTube is so saturated. It's so hard to grow on. And so I expected it to grow really slowly. And what I was going to do is, as it slowly grew, I was going to start my channel so that I had some videos for people to watch, some content there, right? And then I was going to put out a book, publish a book, and you know, they always say for your business model, that establishes you as an expert in your field. Okay, there's a lot of experts in this world and they don't have to write a book. But anyways, so that, okay, and then keep on plodding along, make some videos. Then I was going to start dropping e-courses that would eventually build for your complete understanding of, hopefully complete understanding of how to do bridal gown alterations, okay? So what happened was when I was in this stage, wow, it exploded. And it turns out that most of the appetite has been on YouTube. As you guys know, I'm not huge into social media, but the video consumption it really has exceeded my expectations. So I went ahead and I pushed this out a little ways because this book is not, I don't think it's going to be as helpful as the videos are to you. I think it's going to be a very important supplement. But I'm able to kind of talk about some of the things that I'm going to do in the book in the videos. So I did really back burner that just so I could go ahead and meet your needs in these small videos. Now, as far as the e-courses go, same thing. Instead of plodding along and thinking, oh, people will find me when I'm like 10 videos deep into this instruction, instead of doing that, what I'm going to try to do is produce my videos, keep producing my videos, and very, very soon, I already have the footage, I'm going to produce a large, it's not really going to be an e-course. It's going to be a large collection of videos that show the entire alterations process from start to finish on several different gowns that are of very different styles, but are common styles. Okay, so I'm going to have like a ball gown, like a all over lace gown, a boho sheath gown. We're going to have straps in there. We're going to have, I will get to this in a little bit, but cutting the tulle hem is going to be in there, various types of hems. And so, you know, there may be some parts that are missing out of some of the alterations projects just to avoid redundancy. But for the most part, you're going to be able to watch me alter 3 or 4 very popular dress styles from start to finish. And I think that that's going to be something, it's going to take less production time for me than an actual broken down curriculum. And so I can get it out to you faster, and it's going to be more content in one hit instead of you waiting and only knowing one piece of the puzzle for quite a long time until I can produce the subsequent videos. I hope that makes sense. So in some of my earlier videos, I mentioned this business plan and this timeline. And so when you guys go and look on my page and you don't see this happening, I don't want you to think I've dropped off. I've actually just kind of reevaluated the needs of my audience, because that's what I'm here to meet. So we are dropping videos. I'm going to drop one massive video collection. And then after that, I'll do the book. Now, get back to the question of what is the book including. The book is actually not a sewing book. Like I said, it's a supplement. So it's actually a business book. It's going to talk about the business side of things. I feel like video is the best vehicle for me to show people how to sew, as opposed to books. And I feel like my writing is going to do better in terms of theories, business models, marketing, things like that. So that's going to be more what the book focuses on. This large video, by the way, is also going to include some type of membership where you can either pay a premium price, or the first certain number of people that purchase it are also given one-on-one consulting time as part of the package, where you can specifically ask me questions and I guarantee you that I will address that question. All right, Carolina says, where did you learn all of these tips and tricks? How old are you? Because you sound like a 100-year-old lady from your experience. No offense, please. And no, I don't take offense to that. Let's see. What would I put back? I work really long hours. I think we rack up more experience and faster that way. Okay, so I'm actually in my very early 40s at the time of this recording. And yeah, so basically most of my learning is from reverse engineering. And I do have a Q&A video if you want to look back at it, Carolina, or whoever else is interested, that I go a little bit more into detail of this. But I basically reverse engineer. I love to read books. I do have a books video, favorite books video. And a lot of it's just problem solving. There's that. Let's see. Now, when I run into, this is Terry. When I run into an uneven original hem, I always measured from the waistline if there is one. Okay, so what Terry is saying is somebody else in this row of comments asks what to do when there's an uneven original hem. And that is absolutely correct. You can measure from the waistline. The only issues with that is if you have a bride who has uneven hips. I'm exaggerating. Okay, and let's say you have already done your alterations on the bodice. You know, we start from the top and work down. This is so crude, but I want to exaggerate so you can see what I'm saying. You can take this waistline, and this is going to give you a longer measurement than this because the hip is shaped differently. And then even at that, you could still have a perfectly level hem at the end of the day. So you have to watch out for that. And then you also have to watch out for underneath the crinoline layer. These are notoriously messy. You don't usually get them like that. Sometimes you get them uneven. They come in uneven from the manufacturer. I do have a video coming up of flaws from the manufacturer, and I'm just kind of keeping track of them so that when you have a complaint from your bride, like, look at you, look at what you did to my dress, and you tell her, no, it came that way, and she says, no, they always come perfect, that's when you can double over laughing. No, actually, you don't want to do that in front of the client, but you could always send them to this video, and the video with the flaws in it, and show them that, oh no, they come with a lot of flaws in them. So your crinoline can be uneven, and then it can also be like bunchier in some spots than others. So that's the only caution that I would say, Terry. I would say, yes, you're right. When it's uneven, if the bride has a very symmetrical form, which is not all that common, but if she has a very symmetrical form and both her legs are the same length, and the crinoline is straight, then you can use that measurement. But what I typically do, and this, we'll get to this question later, but I'm going to answer it now because I've already got the sketch here. When we have an uneven original hem, which happens all the time, I have the bride stand in her dress, and I put little pins all along floor length. You'll figure this out when I drop that video that shows start to finish. I always pin to the floor, and then I make note if they want it like 2 inches off the floor or 2 inches long, or however they want it to be, or if they want the final length to be floor length, then I'm going to cut it with my compensating for my hem allowance, and these pins are going to be my final floor length. So I would do that. And then the other question that we're going to get to that I think that this diagram will work well for is somebody else is going to ask, actually several of you have asked, how do we get a good reading on how to hem a tulle ball gown? How do we get that even? Some of my videos, I'll show some of the under layers. Like, let's say you usually on a tulle ball gown, quite often you'll have 5 or 6 layers of tulle. You'll have like a satin layer. I'll hem that to where it's just like a 1/2 inch off the floor, normal satin. And then I will go by the pins, and I will cut I'll lay it out on the table. This is laying on its side, okay? I'll lay it out on the table and I'll align the side seams. I'll pin them together on the table. And then I've got my pin where I marked the floor. And then I'm going to visually draw this line, either with pins or with my eyes, depending on how wide the tool is. And I'm going to cut that tool. I would do that, like, let's say it's the satin layer underneath that I've already hemmed it. I work my way out from the leg. So start with hemming the lining, the satin layer. Then this is me cutting. I would do this on the table for maybe like 3 layers. And then if you've got like 2 more layers, those I would cut as the bride stands. I would cut like I'm like literally on the floor, cutting her dress as she stands. Now, if you're afraid of cutting too short, rule number 1, always make sure they have their shoes on. Rule number 2, always make sure they're looking straight ahead, not looking down. If they look down, they'll ruin the hem. And you got to check. You got to keep looking up and check and make sure that she's not doing that, looking at the hem. And then number 3, if you're afraid of cutting it too short, or if she wants a little bit longer than floor length, have her stand on. You can either have some blocks built that are just cut out like a tabletop board or something that's like 1 inch thick or something like that. Have her stand on 1 inch to give you some wiggle room, or stack some magazines, which, be forewarned, they can be slippery. So you can stack books or magazines or something to just lift her while she's still in her shoes, lift her an extra inch, and then you cut to the floor, take out that book, and you're going to find it's just going to barely grace the floor just enough. That's how I cut tulle hems. So I hope that helps. And I just knocked out several of these questions with that one question. All right, so look. Wildcat 206. Could you do a video on cutting multiple tulle layers, getting them the same length, and graduating to a longer length in the back? There you go. That's just exactly what I do. See if you can see that. Pin the side seams together. This is hooked to my table. You know how I've shown you guys my cutting table where I put the loops in the hook and I hang the dress down the table. So I connect the side seams, run the train off the side of the table, and then pull this taut and pin the layers together. I kick all this stuff out from underneath it to where I'm only dealing with the tulle layers that I'm cutting. Pin them together and cut them. Please leave a question in the comments below if that is not clear. All right. Same, Anita. How would you hem a dress with an uneven original hem? I only ask because that was my challenge this past week for my baby cousin's prom dress. It took way too long, and I know there's an easier way. Thanks. So just to recap, lots of pins, or cut it while they stand in it. And you have to make sure your alterations are done before you cut, okay? All the bodice, all the alterations above need to be done. All right, Nancy asks, have you taught on making corset loops and a modesty panel? I'm interested to see the tricks as this takes way too long. Nancy, I'm not sure, and I do have 3 thumbs up, so I know that there's interest in this. I'm not sure that you're taking way too long compared to what I take, because you didn't really define what way too long is. I feel like it takes a long time, but I will show you what I do. Okay, so I get on the inside of the dress. Okay, this is the inside. Let's say this is the waist seam here. Here's our seam allowances. Okay, this is the bodice, waist, skirt. So I'm going to, a couple different ways that you can do this. I think the easiest way is to take a ribbon and make a tape, okay? some of you will actually use the canvas tape for this. But I usually use a ribbon just in case it shows. I think it looks nice. And ribbons are plenty strong. I'm going to go through and I'm going to mark like every inch on the ribbon. These are not really inches. All right, and then I'm going to take satin spaghetti. And part of this I did kind of wrong. Look more at like these. You don't want to loop out too far because when you put pressure on it, they're really going to loop out. So make it almost straight. The pressure is going to stretch them. So, you know the satin cord that you can get, right? I loop them. I do not cut these. Some of the designers have individual cuts in this. If it's a very sheer gown and it will show, maybe. But most of the time you don't put corsets on sheer gowns, and you got boning and whatnot in there too. So I would normally do this. And then I would put this piece in here. And obviously it needs to face out. I'm exaggerating these loops again, please. I just want you to know that these are loops that we're dealing with, but they're going to be almost straight and the tension is going to form loops. All right, so I'm going to put them in there and I'm going to sew it very carefully, not picking up this part of the loop. You may even want to turn it right side out and tack these out of the way, or pin them out of the way. So you're going to run your stitches down like this through the ribbon part. And then you're going to put boning. Attach a strip of boning here and sew that through. You want a minimum of 3 rows of stitches holding this down. Then I'm going to flip it right side out and check and make sure that it looks good. For extra strength, because a lot of times these do rip, the loops are much less reliable than the grommet backs. For extra strength, I asked the bride if she's okay if I do a top stitch that goes all the way through all the layers, plus the boning, plus the ribbon holding the looping that's right butted up to the edge. I know manufactured gowns often do not have a top stitch there. Some of the very high-end designer lines do though, but most of them don't. They want that fairly seamless there, but what you gain from security from that one extra row of stitches is unbelievable. So I asked the bride if she wants that. So that's how I do that. Now modesty panel is going to be, I just cut, well, I measure her back. Let's say this much is open. Okay. I'm going to get this measurement and this measurement. And I just put that on a Post-it note. And I cut this like 2 inches longer and like 2 inches wider because you want to surpass that. You want it overlapping. And then I go through, I cut this in like a heavy satin for the outer layer usually, but you know you have to match the dress. So if there's like an overlay or something, then you're going to cut an overlay layer also. And then you're going to do a layer of lining or 2. It just depends on how heavy duty versus sheer the gown is. Now on your lining layer, I'm going to go through and cut some sticks of boning and sew them in. Just sew them straight across to the lining. Then I'm going to stack everything. The lining piece is going to be my first piece with pretty side facing up, the boning facing down. Okay, and then I'm going to stack my final outside layer. And then I'm gonna, if there's a middle layer, I'll put that in there. Okay, so you want the right sides together. the pretty sides facing one another. So you'll have the boning on the back side, the inside of your outer layer facing up, okay? Then if there's any middle layers, you're going to stack that on top of it. Once I get them stacked, I'm going to take a piece of boning that's almost the length of the top of it, and I'm going to sew. I did not draw that very well. Sorry, in my eraser, I'm having an eraser fail right now. I would do it kind of like this and stitch where you got some boning overhanging or just barely butted up against your seam allowance. This is going to be kind of near the edge of all the layers, but you want to catch all the layers. And then I'm going to stitch down this way, lock it here, and then pull it. Oh, sorry. Cut this off. Cut off your corners so you don't have a big wad in there. Pull it right side out. And then you're going to have kind of this opening down here. Fold those in and then sew along the edge, top stitch along the edge is the bottom of the modesty panel. Press it, like push all this out nice and neat. Press this. And depending on how visible the construction details are on the gown, it's going to lay flatter if you can do a top stitch along the edge. Most of the time you'll have to avoid that if there's not a lot of construction details of the gown, and that's fine. You can do, if you find it wants to bubble up a lot, you can do some top stitching along the sides here. That's going to help. And then you're going to place this in the gown, and you're going to really tack it strong here. Tack it all the way down so that it's a flap. And then closures, there's a lot of different thoughts about this. You can do like one snap, and then on the inside of the gown have several snaps for different sizes. You can do that. Or if the dress is very heavily constructed and very, very strong, and the bride is going to be fixed in this, just laced up super, super tight, you actually don't even need that closure. So I tell my brides, sometimes we don't even put an attachment on this side. You can also put like a hook here and a few tailor's tacks to hook it to on the inside of the gown. But I tell my brides, the whole idea of a corset is that you're a different size every day. And so you don't know, there's just no way to put the snap in and know that it's going to be aligned on the day of the wedding. It's kind of crazy that these manufactured dresses are made with 1-in-1 snaps. That's crazy. If you're going to do snaps, go ahead and put in several, because this is going to move as you tighten or loosen the gown. Even if it lines up perfectly when she gets in the gown in the morning, because of the pressure of the corset, she's gonna lose fluid throughout the day at her waist, and this is gonna need to be tightened several times, and it's not gonna line up later, and it's gonna start buckling because of the boning. So at that point, they can just unsnap it and just let it slide in there, and usually the pressure of the corset will keep the modesty panel in place. So I usually have that whole conversation with them. So that way, midway through the day, if they tighten it and they get this buckling problem, they don't think their dress is going to explode if it's not snapped together. They need to understand that that snap, it's really a psychological thing. It's there for their peace of mind. It's not necessary. All right, so, and thank you guys so much for participating in this. I hope it's helpful for you guys. All right, Pam says, in one of your recent videos that I watched, you mentioned that sometimes you are called to repair another seamster's sewing. What are some of the things that you look for when you are fixing those alterations? Are there some dresses that are irreparable? What are some tricks to fixing impossible dresses? And wow, Pam, this could be an entire separate video, especially right now. I have a couple of rush jobs right now of girls who are getting married within like a week or two, and the dresses have been botched, and one of them is the worst botched job I've ever seen. And it's terrifying on several levels because, of course, this poor bride, you know, in this, I mean, the gown is just hacked. It's awful. Like, I'm literally like, was the seamstress who did this, was she on drugs? Like, it's that bad. And a lot of it, you know, there's even very crucial seams, weight-bearing seams, tension-bearing seams, super important. That should have boning and all that good stuff. And they're literally just hand-basted together, like visibly pulling apart on the bride's body. It's awful. And then the hem is literally 4 inches too short. That's not just like a little oversight where you like accidentally, you know, you pinned it to the floor length and you accidentally cut it there and you needed to roll it up. You know, in that case, your hem is like 3/4 of an inch too short, right? Or you could just do a serged rolled hem and it would be the exact right length. That's the way I would fix that error. That's a common error. It's not the end of the world, very fixable. But we're talking 4 inches, feet hanging out. Like, it looks awful. So to go through these questions one at a time, most of the time when I'm fixing errors of other seamsters, a lot of times seamsters are only trained to take things up like a size, okay, a size or two, and they just do an even amount. And then they don't think about the fact that the bride's waist is somewhere else than what the dress is made for. And I have a video on this of how to raise or lower the waist of a gown. And that's super important for taking your alterations to next level. That takes it from like beginner, that's only going to be able to take a few standard alterations on, to a pro that can really fix some intense problems. So what I'm saying is, if the gown is shaped like this and the bride's body, again, I'm exaggerating, is like this, you know, if her waist is a couple inches longer than the waist of the gown, you're going to have to change the gown to drop the waist. This is not about just taking it up a set amount all the way down. And then the same issue here. Here's the gown, and let's say the bride is shaped like this. We run into this problem very often. She's short-waisted, and you're like, but it seems too big up here, but then now it doesn't fit here. And then what they'll end up doing is take this in, and then they'll hike the dress up to force this waist on her. Her dress is way too high on her. It's, you know, being pushed up toward her chin or something. That's a super common issue, and that's one of the issues that I'm fixing right now. So what you end up having in that case, you'll get a gown where here's the bride, her dress is like shoved up under her arms, right? And it seems way too tight for some reason. And you're like, why is that so tight? And across her back, it's actually going to be pinching her skin. And her skin's going to be coming out right below her arms. This is how the dress is going to look in the back. And her hips are usually going to be popping out immediately in the back, not looking pretty anywhere. So this is how it ends up looking. instead of the, you know, bringing it down lower where the apex of the bust of the dress is in line with the apex of her bust. You want a little space here for the underarms so you don't have stuff squishing. You don't want anything gushing here. This needs to be lowered and let out. That's what that needs there. So to fix that, you're going to have to get into some waist work. So definitely check out that video if you're not sure of what I'm talking about. I've got 2 different videos on that. How to lengthen the waist, how to shorten the waist. There's that. And then, okay, hem repair. So what I'm going to do here, my answer to that is when someone says, is there ever anything that's irreparable? I do get asked that by clients a lot of times. It's kind of one of those common curiosity questions. So not really. What I tell them, what limits our ability to repair is usually time. You know, are they getting married tomorrow and I'm out of town? I mean, no, we can't do that. Or money, budget. It's really sad when they've already paid for their alterations that have completely botched the fit, and they just blew all their budget on these botched alterations, and then they really need to come to me and they're going to have to pay for their alterations again. Like, you know, what I tell them is, I'm sorry, I feel your pain. I know you're having to pay for your alterations twice. But it's not my fault. And if I, as a business owner, took on every botched gown and corrected them for free, I would be working for free. And I would be very quickly driven out of business in a matter of weeks. Like, I just cannot do it. I have to get paid, and I have to get paid the same thing that I would get paid if I was doing another gown. As a business owner, and I get into this in one of my Q&A videos too, the money questions answered. As a business owner, I decided a long time ago, I'm not in it just for the love of it. I'm not in it for charity. I'm not in it for community service. I'm in this as a business, and I have to pick the jobs that pay because it's a business. And I know that's offensive to some, but that should only be offensive to people who are looking at those other options. They're in it for charity. They're in it for community service. They're in it for a hobby. They should view it that way. I'm in it for a business. I can't view it that way and remain a business. So it sounds heartless, but businesses don't really have hearts. They have calculators. So I tell them that from the very beginning. Look, I know it hurts. It hurts me too, but I have to get paid for this. And you know, whatever you want to do with the other seamstress is your business. One thing I never do is I don't want to be quoted to the other seamstress. It's not my job to critique her work. It's not my job to somewhat testify against her, so to speak, and them run back and say, oh, this other seamstress said this is the worst she's ever seen. This current client that I'm doing the repair for, I did not tell her that's the worst I've ever seen. I am biting my lip like nobody's business while I'm working on that dress. I just let them know that the repairs are going to cost pretty much as the original alterations would be. And sometimes more, because sometimes it takes extra work to get us back to ground zero to where we can even begin to do the alterations. So that's my answer to that. It's not that they're irreparable. It's limited by time and budget. So what I'm going to do in this case is I'm going to drop this layer down by adding fabric. Luckily for her, this layer is several layers deep under an overlay. So I'm just going to attach it to the edge, and I'm going to let it kind of be a little bit free flowing so that I work it into looking like a design feature at the bottom. This has, unfortunately, a very wide horsehair braid on the edge of it too. I'm just going to remove the horsehair braid and then put in a bridal satin in a kind of relaxed way there. And then we're going to, the next layers, we have like a chantilly lace layer. We're going to drop that down a little bit. Her tulle layer is not going to be dropped. We're going to just let it stagger up. So normally you stagger down. You'll say that the layer closest to the feet is the shortest. Then you'd have your lace layer, and then you'd have your tulle layer. Well, the tulle layer is just going to sit on top of the lace layer, and she's okay with that. That's a money issue. If she wants to pay more and correct that, she can. The ways that we have corrected that in the past is we go one layer under the tulle layer, whether that's lace or tulle, it doesn't matter. But we're going to go one layer under and go up a couple feet, and we're going to very delicately stitch on some tulle that is the right length. And if it requires several layers, then we'll do several layers like this. And this is usually going to be hand stitched on with like invisible thread or something. And then you're going to drop down your tulle, and this girl is just leaving it like this. If this top layer is matched in its fullness, if this top additional layer, I should say, is matched in its fullness to your top layer of tulle, you don't really notice this top layer being shorter. It just looks like a design element. And they have the option to have you cut that top layer a little shorter than the others all the way around through the train, if that's what they desire. And so that'll be worked in just fine. So that's how I fix that problem. All right, let's see. Now, we did have a couple questions that were not bridal. DL Balm says, glad your voice is returning. I'd like advice on the neoprene fabric and also how to blend in rolled hem with an existing hem. I actually have footage of this, and that's going to be coming up in an upcoming video, but I'll also talk about it today. To explain, if I've hemmed the gown in the front and there's a train that doesn't need hemming, how can I get the new hem to blend with the train? All right, so a couple of people did ask me about neoprene. It's funny, I do bridal, so I'm like, I don't know if there's like neoprene bridal. I'm thinking you guys just kind of do all kinds of sewing, and you just figured you'd throw that in case I had experience with it. So I'm going to answer it from that perspective. One time I was commissioned by the town. One of their maintenance workers had crushed his arm, and they'd put a steel plate in his arm, and whenever he had to work in the plumbing and get his hand down in the cold water, the thermal shock would hurt his bone and cause a lot of pain. So they wanted a neoprene sleeve custom made for him that would insulate his arm from thermal shock. So I just did, you know, I made the custom pattern for his hand and adjusted the fit and all that. And we did a waterproof separating zipper that was going to be in a place that was not in his way. I forget where it was. This was years ago. But I'm thinking I just like did right sides together, and I'm thinking I just did a straight stitch together, and then I splayed them like that and did a zigzag top stitch, so it was super strong. That's how I did that, and that's literally my only experience with that fabric, so there's not much else I can say about that, but I hope that helps. Okay, tapering in a seam. This is a biggie. Again, I've got this coming up in a video. But, all right, what she's talking about is you're hemming the front, and then you've got your train. And obviously, you know, it comes more like this, right? And you don't want to be like, arch, and then just go into this. So, and you don't even want it to be this abrupt. You're going to do more like I mentioned before. I'm going to mark it, and I'm going to go like this. And I usually, this is up to the bride, but I usually give her, like, I'm saying this is the floor. I usually give her like an inch or two extra length here. So like, let's say she wants it hemmed to the floor. I give her an inch or two, and then I've got to go from here to the train in a nice taper. And what she's saying is, when you're sewing, you know, you've cut this part off. Now I'm going to do this like a very close, okay? This is the original. And let's say you're cutting here and you're going like this. Again, don't make that too sharp there, okay? Cut this away and you get back here, and this is your original rolled hem, right? Like this. And you just cut into it. And what happens a lot of times is when you put your new rolled hem in, you'll have your old rolled hem and your new rolled hem, and then you'll have like a kink. Okay, this is not the end of the world. I'm not gonna come after you if you do this, if it is several layers deep. Like if this is your satin layer and you've got overlay over it, you've got stabilizing tacks before it and behind it, that's never gonna allow this to see the light of day, and your bride is not a high budget bride, okay? Because this is going to save you a lot of time. Not a lot of time, but it's going to save you a little time. And this is usually where some brides like to save a little bit of money. So this is part of knowing your bride. And this goes into the Q&A about money questions answered also. You can watch that. But know your bride, know her budget, know what she wants. If this is a top layer, or she's a high budget bride and she wants everything to be perfect or as perfect as possible, what you're going to do is, where this cutting happens into the old, you're going to go ahead and undo the stitching for another 6 inches. You can even press it if you want. And then what it's going to look like is like this. You're going to have like a jagged part because that was rolled up in here when you cut it. You're going to have this jagged edge. You're going to cut the jagged edge off, and you're going to taper your cut until you get to the original roll. And then you're going to start your roll back there and just start right on top of their stitches and start your roll, and it's going to be perfectly smooth. So that's how you taper that. There were quite a few thumbs ups on that. So again, Erin asked that too. As many formal hems as I do, I still struggle with blending the new hem stitching with the existing stitching. I would love a little sewing snack on that. So that is absolutely just back up. That's my answer to that. Back up like 6 more inches of undoing the seam. Merchant 7396 asks, do you service your machines or take them to a repairman? Number one, buy high quality machines so that you don't have to take them to a repair person very often. I do self-service most of the time, but it's kind of like a car. The key to it really is oil. So when I go on vacation, I douse my machines down. I mean, I know you think I'm exaggerating. I am not. I douse my machines down with oil. Every oil hole is literally flooded, and there's like little puddles of oil all over the throat plate of my machine. And I let it soak in that while I'm gone, and then when I come back, I just thoroughly clean them. But I do normally adjust them myself. When I can't fix it, then yes, I'll take them to a repair person. A little hint, if you have several commercial machines, and you can't get them to someone, what you do, this is how you can find a commercial repair person, okay? Many of us in small town America, so I'm not speaking for my global audience right now, I'm sorry, but it might still fit for you, but I don't know that, okay? But many of us in small town USA, We have old sewing factories, old sewing mills in our local area. Or you may even have some current sewing contractors. That's what you're going to Google, sewing contractors. Okay, this is if you cannot find a commercial repair, sewing machine repair person. You're going to Google, find sewing contractors, and you're going to call them up and ask who do they use. Usually they're commercial sewing machine repair person if it's not a large factory. Large factories are going to have the repair person on site always as a full-time worker. Small factories, smaller factories, they're going to have a traveling commercial sewing machine repair person who comes on site. You're going to get that contact, and that's who you're going to use. The reason why you have to go that route is because sometimes that sewing repair person lives states away and he travels on a circuit. So you're not going to know who is working your circuit unless you ask someone locally. So do that. Worst case scenario, all else fails, detach the head from the machine, box it up really well, and if your person that you bought the machine from is a full service shop, which I recommend doing that, you ship the head back to the person that you bought the commercial machine from. You're not shipping the whole table, just the head. Yes, it's going to cost a lot of money. Ship it back, let their repair person service it, get it back up and running smoothly, and they ship it back to you. You may have to do some minor adjustments when it comes back because of a bumpy ride, but it'll mostly be right. So there's your ways to do that. Kathleen Ann 66, feel better. Thank you so much. I do feel better. My allergies never lasted very long, thankfully. All right. L Bridal says, I had the same question, and let's see. I had the same question, and I'll add to it. What is the best way to pin it? And I'm not sure which one, but hopefully I already answered that. Stacy was also asking about neoprene. Jillian Austin, your site has helped me so much. Seriously, I have way more confirmation / confidence now. Actually, a lot of you say that, and I think that's super important. So a lot of you have said you may learn a little something here or there, but you're not 100% learning. You're really just confirming the way you've been doing things, and that's just as important, right? Could you please add a list of where you purchase buttons, tools, button elastic, lace pieces, etc.? Thank you. All right, Jillian. So the scoop with that is I source those kind of all over the place. So I do have some sourcing information on my website, bridalsewingtechniques.com. And you can go there to the products page and see where I get things. If it's not listed, I may not have a set person. Also, I do have some sources that I do consider proprietary. Not very many, but some. And if you do a retreat with me, you actually get a copy of all my sources in detail. That's not something, it's kind of too detailed to just put out there in the interwebs. It's like a spreadsheet of past purchases and contact information and things like that. So, I would allow you to get a copy of that here and then just kind of send you on with, I would probably give you like verbal notes on certain ones, like, yeah, they used to be good, now they're bad, or, you know, whatever. But it's not something that I would publish as a solid recommendation online for everyone, if that makes sense. But people do have access to it at my retreats in person. All right, Terry says, so Brenda, what do you suggest for getting hemlines even all the way around? I always start with lining and go from there. Terry, exactly right. And I was mentioning that earlier, showing how I start with the layer closest to the legs and work out. And the one closest to the legs, if it's multiple layers, I usually put that to the top of the toe or the top of the foot, something like that. Just an inch or so off the ground, and then each layer gets a little bit longer. And with more accuracy as you work your way out. Carolina, hi Brenda, I hope you were all right and your voice is back. I would like to ask how you deal with super busty brides. I've had emails and questions about this lately, so we definitely need to talk about this. Sometimes I feel like they need bust extension to cover the top, but I never did know how to help. That's exactly right. Sometimes, Carolina, they do need that. So what she's saying is, what I do is I fit the gown to them. I do ask them if they're a busty bride to order the gown to their bust size. That's going to help the most. Unfortunately, brides like to flatter themselves and order sometimes on some of their smaller sizes. So if they're an inverted triangle body type, they're going to be tempted to order for their waist or their hips because it's more flattering, and they get a size 4 or whatever, and they're really like a 10 up here, or whatever. Same thing with pairs. They'll do that. We'll have the pair body type, and they need to be ordering for this. Well, they don't want to order a 14, and so they go order an 8, and then we have a lot more work to do to let out and gusset and so forth than if we were just taking up the top. But anyways, with a busty bride, what I would normally do, we normally need to add extra boning to keep this from flipping out. Almost always the boning is inadequate. Some lines do better than others, but you're going to want to do that. And even on the side, you need to add some, because you'll start getting some side spill, some side bulge if the side is weak, okay? So strengthen the boning. Definitely don't need push-up pads in here. We want things to settle. Most brides who are busty would rather a minimizing look rather than a maximizing. And then if there's extra work to be done, number one, I always warn my busty brides that when I fit the top to them and get the bodice centered on them as it should be, because most of the time they pull it up too high when they try it on in order to get their coverage here, and the waist is like way off. But I warn them, once I get this locked on the hips and where it needs to be, that a lot of times this is going to seem way too low, and they're going to feel very embarrassed and awkward, okay? So I tell them ahead of time, don't get scared, we're going to fix that. So when they come out, if there's not enough coverage, Carolina, you're exactly right. You have to cover the top. So what I do is I get a matching fabric and I build this up. And I do need to do an extensive video on this at some point. But I've even had to open up this seam allowance before and cut out new that is matching fabric, matching overlay, whatever. Cut out new, extend the boning to where it needs to be, and re-sew your edge. So that is exactly what has to happen sometimes. Now I did have an email where I was talking with someone where if it's just the cup size, it's not big enough, they have enough coverage up top but just not enough cup room, and even letting it out is not working because it's gapping in the back now. What you're going to hope for in that case is a ruche style bodice where it's got the folds coming across. And I told her I've actually split the cups before and let them come open here and put matching gussets to that lining fabric in there, reposition your boning, and then you're going to have to retack your ruching, rearrange your ruching. You may end up having to set it loose all the way across this top seam and retack all your folds to cover that gusset work. That's an extremely deep alteration. Moral of the story is they need to order the correct size. Order based on cup for busty brides, and if they didn't, then this is what has to be done. All right, how do you best match lace and appliques to a bridal gown that needs gussets on the side? Any tried and true merchants? No. Basically, Therese, I would say categorically, you're going to look for your merchants. Okay, so if it's French lace, you're going to go for a French lace supplier. If it's a modern embroidered lace, manufactured lace, a lot of times I put that responsibility on the bride. I tell them go back to the bridal shop and order the extra lace and the fabric by the yard from the manufacturer. That is a thing. It is expensive. There are lead times, but that's the bride's responsibility. If the dress doesn't fit and, you know, she ordered it that way or her weight changed, it helps so much to kind of compartmentalize, just like how a doctor comes into you know, an extreme situation, you know, in the ER. The doctor can't lose it. The doctor can't put her, you know, entire life on hold, but so much. She can't do that for every patient who comes in. She can't run from the operating room crying because something went wrong. No, she's got to keep a separate section in her brain. She's got to keep her emotions in check. She's got to think technically very strong about what she's doing, and that is going to serve the patient the best. Having a physician who is not burnout, who is not emotionally involved, but rather calm and as accurate as can be. And the family is going to be the ones who are emotional and whatever. So yes, that doesn't mean I don't sometimes cry with the mothers of the bride. You know, I think about my daughter getting married and I want to cry and, you know, all that. Yes, that's a thing, but you can't let that emotion cause you to make bad decisions, costly decisions, time-consuming decisions. So you do need to push back a little bit on some of these responsibilities that belong to the brides. So sometimes I prefer to source because I know they're going to come back with something terrible. If it's something that I know they can't get from their manufacturer anymore, I'll try to step in and source. And that's when I take that view of categorically, where should my source come from? A modern manufacturing supplier that, you know, has mill-ins or something like that? Or am I going for a traditional French lace? Another great thing to do is have good bridal shop relationships, where I have bridal shops that will give me severely damaged gowns that have a current lace on them. That is invaluable, and the bridal shops should be motivated to do that for you because you're using it for their clients, and you're going to put out all sorts of fires by using that. So that's another thing to look into, is start collecting those scraps from your local shops. And guys, I think that's a wrap. The rest of them were just more comments, like in conversation to what was going on above. So I think that's everything. Any more comments or questions, leave them down below, please, and I'll be happy to help you in any way that I can, and I can maybe roll it into a future Q&A. I do have some exciting things coming up for you guys. Super exciting videos. I have a video that I've been working on for a very long time. It's how to make the illusion and lace sleeves. I'm super excited about that. So that's when you have a bride that comes in, you know, with this kind of situation, and she wants lace sleeves. That's a problem because you don't have the traditional arm's eye that you would like to have to connect a sleeve to. All right, so boy, do we get in some nitty gritty with that. And I'm super excited to talk to you about the book that I used for, you know, coming up with the pattern for this, and a new relationship that I have with the author of that book. Super exciting, guys. So stay tuned. That'll be coming up soon. Thanks for watching. I know what you're looking for. You've been sewing for years, but you want to get into full-time bridal sewing. But there's something missing. You're missing the backroom secrets, the industry tips and tricks. The tools, the sources, the techniques that give you the speed and the accuracy that the industry demands. You have found it.